truncated class, a shorter lesson than usual. At around 12, we're going to go upstairs to somewhat participate in the funeral for Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zichrono Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I imagine it'll all be in Yiddish, but Rav Listman said he'll try to translate. Hopefully his Yiddish is good. But I imagine they're going to have Hebrew subtitles or Hebrew translation, and then he can translate from that into English for you. And the truth is, I want to prepare you a little bit that there is a custom that's prevalent in some segments of the Haredi world, and that is to say the eulogies in a sing-song fashion. And it's sort of like a whining, sort of wailing. And very sad, and like a wailing type of sing-song tune, and even to scream very loudly, to sort of, yeah. So don't be surprised if you see, and crying, I imagine crying is part of it. And really the goal of a eulogy, believe it or not, the Talmud says, the greatest success at giving a eulogy. Yossi, you with us? You're sort of hidden behind there, and I'd love to see you if you could see me also.
Would you say that?
In any case, the Talmud says that the highest reward comes to somebody who gives a eulogy and makes people cry. The crying of the crowd is a sign of respect and tremendous loss. The fact that people feel a loss is a sign of respect to the person who died. And so one way to make people cry is to cry yourself. And so, and I assume the people that are speaking are people that are particularly feeling the loss because they're students of his, because they're, as a matter of fact, relatives of his. Rav Gershon Edelstein will be speaking, and he's his brother-in-law, I believe. They announced who the people giving the eulogies are going to be. It could be they change everything at the last minute, who knows. But the idea is, of course, also to pay respects to the deceased. And I was taught that really a good eulogy should include a little bit of the story of the person, so that everybody can appreciate who he was and what was lost, the person that was lost. But there's different styles. You know, some people actually, they tell a little bit about the person, where he grew up, and where he studied, and maybe a personal story about their relationship. And others quote verses and different passages from the Talmud and from the text about how terrible it is when the great tzaddik passes on, and how much the world loses, and there's all sorts of hyperbole and metaphors of what a change in the cosmic universes happen when a tzaddik dies. And so there's different styles of eulogies. Some are more personal, some are more, midrashic based, and some have the sing-song, some don't use the sing-song, some, and as I said, the lingua franca in those places is Yiddish, so probably it'll be in Yiddish, languages they speak. Maybe there'll be some rabbinic Hebrew, I don't know, with an Ashkenazi accent, but. Either way, there'll be translations, and there'll be it'll be accessible. Thank you. Okay, so that's why we're going to have a shortened lesson. Question about that, Hirsch?
Well, I've heard that Rav Kanievsky was one of the biggest Rav in the Haredi world. Would you say this is true?
True.
Was he like a Rav of a generation, or also like this?
Generation, I don't know. It's hard to define a generation, but current, unchallenged leader is clear.
Could you give us a brief biography where he was born, when he was born? Was he born here? Did he make Aliyah? Did he survive?
I think he was born in Europe. I think he's like one of the last.
He was born in Pinsk in Poland. His family made Aliyah when he was 6, and he never at that time, the British mandated Palestine, and since his family made Aliyah, he never left for Lars once. Never left once.
I doubt he even left B'nai Brak, to tell you the truth. He was just not interested. He was just not interested. And maybe he went to a wedding sometime. I don't know. But he learned Torah. He learned Torah from a young age until a very old, ripe age of 94. And I spoke about him already in the early class. Some of you missed the early class, so I'm just going to repeat just a little bit. But he clearly was a master of all of the rabbinic literature, Torah literature, and it's quite vast, so it's quite a feat. And tremendously, they say he had a sense of humor too. There's something that I will say that is a little unfortunate, is that his style was very, very concise. He always tried to write whatever and say whatever he wanted to say in the most concise way possible, not to waste any time, to go back to learning. And so also it sort of developed, it sort of dovetails with the modern era, actually. It goes together with, it fits in very well. It fits in very well with so nowadays there's a phenomenon, it's called shoot SMS. You've heard of this? Shoot means responsa, which is an ancient form of literature of people writing a rabbi with a halacha question, and many times the question is very much an essay in itself of the rabbi asking the question and then the rabbi answering the question. Sometimes it's just a simple, people of a community would ask who don't know any better. They didn't have a rabbi, so they would send a letter. In the old days, when pigeons. No, I'm going a little bit too far. After pigeons. But however, they would send letters with couriers, and then the rabbi would write a long, detailed answer based on the sources, why he thinks this is the correct answer. And this is an age-old Jewish literature, a genre of literature called responsa. In the Hebrew, it's called she'elot u'tshuvot, which is shortened to shoot. So in recent years, there's been something, sure, if you like, there's been a phenomenon in the last 20 years or something, which instead of this nice essays, you'd get a well-reasoned, argued answer. You'd send just a short message and get back a short answer, and that's why they call it shoot SMS, because you send a message. I'll just write it for you on the board. She'elot. That's supposed to be a shin. I'm sorry. She'elot u'tshuvot. And then if you take the shin from here and the vav taf from here, that becomes shoot. Shoot is a short way of saying responsa, which is, of course, a form of halachic literature. Okay? And nowadays it's become, you need to, so you ask the rabbi a question, it gives you a one-word answer, 2 words answer, 3 words answer. So it's a little bit of a shame because you don't really have the reasoning. And this literature of responsa is filled with, essentially it's a form of Torah study, and there's lots of beautiful Torah essays which you won't find in commentaries. You'll find them in the responsa. But in Shut SMS you find nothing except for bottom lines. Bottom lines, bottom lines, bottom lines. Just, one-word answers, 2-word answers. And that sort of takes a lot out of the back and forth. The beauty of Torah is that you can debate it, you can argue. Why do you say this? Because of your sources and your rationale and your understanding of the sources, etc. And so he never had time for any of that. He did write, even his commentaries that he wrote were as short as possible, 1 line, 1 sentence, one sometimes even 1 word, just to explain what needed explaining. Tremendously insightful. But when it came to fostering discussion, it's lacking. And then as he got to be more popular and more central, an authority, so he had even less time. And so you had somebody who wrote an entire book on a subject, and he had a few questions on the topic. So he would go to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and he would ask him his questions I wrote a 100-page essay on this. What do you think? And he would answer in 1 or 2 words. And then he wrote another 100-page essay on another topic, and Rav Chaim Kanievsky would answer 1 or 2 words. People would write an entire shaila, and you would send them a postcard. He'd just give you the answer on the same postcard. He would send it back to you. This was in the day before there was electronics. In any case, so you have books published where the rabbi is a big scholar and publishes a full book full of his Torah ideas and insights and halachic psak, and in the back you'll have an appendix of the list of questions and answers that it was given by Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And he would bring that in the book that I asked him and he gave me the answer. So it's a really sort of a novel form of response, a novel form of interaction between rabbis where almost there's something missing from it, that you don't really have a lot of discussions, but it's more like he had such authority and such stature that his one-word answer would be like, okay, well if he says so, then that's the end of the discussion type of thing. Even though discussion, you never want the discussion to end. In Judaism, you want the discussion to be further and to argue it out. So this was, but this was his style. This was his style, and whether by that was his personality or the nature of that he always wanted to go back to learn or whatever it is, the one-word answers. And then that dovetailed very nicely with the idea that people would come to him not only for his Torah questions and answers, but they'd come to him for blessings. And blessings, one word. Say, you come to him and you tell him a long story. My daughter's sick, and we went to this doctor and went to that doctor, and I have X many kids, and my wife is having a breakdown, or whatever it is. A long, long Megillah, and it would take you 10 minutes to present and you'd get one answer. Say, Refuah Shlema, or he'd say, Bracha V'Atzlacha, or he'll say, I wish you, I bless you with happiness. That's it. So it's sort of like a strange type of interaction, but this was his way. And
Jewish Calvin Coolidge.
I don't know much about him, but anyways. And so let's say something about the halachos of kashrus. We have 5-10 minutes. So we're going to discuss now we have to discuss 2 topics which we left off when we were kashering the kitchen. Right, we talked about kashering the different elements of the kitchen. And what happens when you come to a non-kosher establishment? We mentioned it. You come to a hotel room or a tzimer, a type of little, and they have dishes there. Now you don't know who used the dishes. You can assume, depends on some places, or you buy a house or rent an apartment. It comes with dishes and pots and pans. So unless you know, you can't assume that they're kosher. But let's say, go back to the original question. You're staying at a guest house. A guest house has some cups, some glasses, some bowls, some cutlery. Can you use it? So what's the answer? If you don't know they're kosher, you assume they're not kosher. Right, so you don't know the owner, you assume that somebody before you, we live in a mixed society, maybe they didn't keep kosher. So probably this is treif. So you want a glass of water. Can you use the cups? You go shopping in the supermarket, buy some fruit. Can you put the fruit in the bowl? So you guys know the answer already. That obviously
Would there be a difference between Chutzlaritz and Eretz Yisrael?
Could be.
In other words, would I assume that in Chutzlaritz, the treif would be outright treif, whereas in Eretz Yisrael, I might be more concerned about mixing of meat and milk, but the chances are the bulk of what food...
Either way, it's not kosher. Either way, it's not kosher.
Right, but we talked about when we were koshering that there was a difference between something that said...
Right, but in the end of the day, if dishes got meat and milk, you're not allowed to use them until you kosher them. Mm-hmm. So, are you allowed to use them? So the simple answer is no. You're not allowed to use non-kosher dishes. That's the simple answer. But there is room to be lenient in some ways. Of course, if you're going to use hot food, then you're really in trouble. More in trouble. You really shouldn't use it with anything hot. Because if it's hot, then you might have the absorbed taste come out. Even it might be after 24 hours, but maybe it's not. In any case, never use those dishes that are assumed to be not kosher for anything that's hot. But if it's all cold, you want to use the, I don't know, there's a plate there, and you want to cut your cheese on it. You bring kosher cheese, and now you have a plate. But can you use the knife to cut your kosher, non-kosher knife? Can you use it? So nowadays, again, assuming it's clean, make sure it's very clean, and there's no leftovers on it. But if it's all clean and it's nothing hot, then there's room to be lenient and use the cutlery for cold foods. Have a glass of water in the cup. There's no transfer of taste when there's cold items, and so there's room to be lenient if you need to. I mean, nowadays, there's the best solution is to use disposable. Of course, it's not the best solution anymore because of the environmental considerations and the price considerations because of that. But if you don't have any other option, then you may use the cold, dry, you could put your salad in a bowl, and you can use a spoon that's a treif spoon, as far as you know, to eat a yogurt. Nothing will happen to eat cereal in a bowl of milk in one of those dishes. Even if they need kashering, when you have a need, you can be lenient because you're pretty sure that there's no taste that's going to be transferred. Okay? Now, what about a barbecue?
If I can ask you a good question.
Yes. Yeah.
What happens if one goes to someone's house? It's a Jewish house, but they don't exactly keep the laws of Kashrut there, the highest of standards.
Same thing.
So
Eat cold food. Cold food.
So cold food you can eat with...
Yeah, it depends. Listen, if there's a need, obviously you shouldn't be eating in a non-kosher house. But if it's a relative and they invite you over and you don't want to offend them, if there's a need, there's room to be lenient as long as it's out cold. Glass of water is no problem, right? Yes, Moshe.
Am I allowed to drink the water from these bottles over here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so
They're like, well, why do you think that they're not kosher?
that's not because they're not kosher. He's asking a law of stealing.
I know.
Stealing
Yeah,
it. No. It's for you to use. It's for you to use.
Shakol.
As long as the everything's clean and cold, you can use it when you're in a bind. Is that clear? Barbecues usually is absorbs taste, whatever taste it absorbs. If it's non-kosher meat or if it's milk after meat, whatever it is, it absorbs it without the aid of any liquid directly through the fire, and therefore it needs libun chamur. Libun chamur usually is very, very hot, but usually you can get the grill and the various pieces of the barbecue very, very hot, very, very easily, because it's a barbecue. You turn it on to the highest maximum temperature, and if it's a grill that can be closed, you close it, whatever, cause it to be the hottest possible, and usually it becomes red hot, so much so that you can consider it libun chamur, and you got to make sure that very, very hot fire reaches all the parts of the grill, otherwise you can't use it. And of course, you don't, I was going to say, of course, you have to clean it first, but you don't really have to clean it first, because the fire burns out not only what's inside the absorbed metal, but also whatever's on the outside gets burned to a crisp, and it's not considered food anymore. And so it's a little confusing because sometimes you can't get it to be red hot in all places of the grill. And so you have to make sure that the grill is moved over where it is red hot, and it actually reaches the appropriate temperature. But technically, that is the way it's done. Yes, Nisim.
So let's say you're going to a guest house and there's a stove there. Can you
Stove is not a barbecue. I'm talking specifically about a barbecue grill outside.
can you put the stove on the highest setting?
Stove is something
Like
else.
The oven. Sorry, the oven.
The oven is something else.
Close
Right? There's a lot of different appliances. We discussed them all in the last week. So, not really on topic. But
Understood.
about the ovens, we said there's a debate, believe it or not. Machloket. Some people say you can kasher ovens at the highest temperature, and that's good enough. Libun kal usually is all you can get to. It's a stage type of libun. Some people say that's the highest temperature it ever absorbed any taste with, so that's what's going to get it out as well. But some people are machmir on that, and there's two opinions about that. A lot of people just don't kasher their oven for Pesach. They do all their cooking on the stovetop, and they're baking even. There's something called a sir pele. It's a type of baking pan where you can bake on top of the range, on top of a gas or electric range. Special type of like a special baking dish that works on top of the gas. So you don't have to use the oven. If obviously if you get used to it, it's hard to go back. But for the sake of Pesach, they want to be machmir, and they don't use that. The best is if you have self-cleaning oven. We talked about ovens more last week. We'll stop here because we should go upstairs and participate in the eulogy, at least virtually.
Okay, we're gonna watch